If you want to truly scale an e-commerce brand, there's one thing you absolutely must understand, and that's retention. In other words, the ability to keep the customers you already have coming back to buy from you again and again. See, most brands spend a majority of their time, energy, and money chasing new customers. Yet the brand that makes the most money builds something that compounds month after month, all made with one shift. They stop obsessing over finding new customers and start paying attention to current ones. So in this video, I'm going to show you exactly what this retention versus acquisition shift looks like and why once you see the numbers behind it, going back to the old way of thinking generally stops making sense. And I know this because I worked with over 100 e-commerce brands and generated over 150 in total revenue across all of them. And this shift is something I do with every single brand I work with. Section 1, the acquisition trap. So the first thing we need to do is identify what the acquisition trap is. Essentially, this trap revolves around brands focusing so much on acquisition that their only thought is how do I get more customers through the door. But the problem is this means every month they're basically starting all over, because their previous customers aren't coming back consistently. And what makes this interesting is every customer you ever acquired, you already paid for them. You did the work to get them through the door and get them to buy. But for most brands, that's it. The moment customers complete the purchase, the relationship ends right there. So what ends up happening is you're spending money every single month to find new customers while the ones you already have quietly disappear. That's the ceiling most brands keep hitting and can never figure out why. And that's where retention truly comes into play. But ironically, retention isn't what most people think it is. What retention really is. See, most people hear the word retention and immediately think it means offering more discounts, setting up loyalty programs, and just doing more to stay visible on social media. And those things are great, but that's not what retention really is. Retention is when a customer subconsciously decides your brand is definitely worth coming back to. Not because you gave them an incentive, but because something about your experience they have with your brand makes you the obvious choice for next time. But I want you to think about what that actually means for a second. For example, who do you think of when I say sneakers? Chances are your brain went straight to Nike, and you didn't have to think too hard about it. The fact is, Nike didn't get to that point by consistently chasing new customers. They got there by doing the same thing over and over again that made their existing customers feel something every time they interact with the brand. The product, the community, the just do it mentality that somehow made buying a pair of shoes feel like a personal statement. And over time, that experience compounded. One loyal customer became 10, 10 became a few thousand, and now Nike doesn't have to convince anyone that they're worth buying from. That's what real retention looks like at the highest level. And the crazy thing is the same principle that built one of the most recognizable brands on the planet applies to your e-commerce store too. Because retention isn't just reserved for billion-dollar companies. It's available to any brand willing to think about their customers beyond a transaction. And the brands that consistently pull this off aren't just delivering a good product. They're thinking about every single touchpoint a customer has with their brand, to the moment they get their first order, to every interaction that comes after. They're making sure every one of these moments feel personal and intentional. That way, the customer feel like the brand truly cares about them as a person, not just another transaction. This retention mindset is why top brands are pulling further ahead while everyone else wakes up at square one all over again. And to show you just how much this retention mindset shift can impact your brand, let's look at what the actual number says. Section 3, the numbers behind the retention mindset. So just a reference, acquiring a new customer can cost 5 to 25 times more than keeping an existing one. Take a second and just sit with that fact. It costs us 25 times to go find someone new than to hold on to someone who already knows your brand, bought from you once, and trusts you more than the other competition. And it goes even further than that. Harvard Business Review found that increasing your customer retention rate just by 5% can grow your profits anywhere from 25% to 95%. Again, not revenue, profit. And that number only gets better the longer the customer stays with you. See, what most brands don't realize is there's a real difference between what a one-time buyer is worth versus what a returning customer is worth. This is where lifetime value comes in. And this one number can be the difference between a business that fails and one that 5x in a couple years. For example, all right, so this is a live client account pulled up in Hyro. So I want to walk through exactly what a strong LTV looks like. That's not in theory, but in a real, dollar amount, real store with real analytics. So let's start here in their cohort retention. So their 30-day LTV right now, $123.32, which is 9.1% up from last year of $112.99. And if you push it out to 90 days, the customer is worth about $132.08 versus the 120 from 30 days. And then their first order ALV was $109. So before retention became a focus, the same customers for the first 30 days was worth about $112.99. Push it out 90 days and the customer's worth $132 versus $120 before. So that shows a steady lift across the board. But the LTV chart on the right is where it gets interesting. So watch how that customer matures. At 30 days, they're worth $123. At 60 days, $128. At 90, $132. At 180, that's $141. And then by day 365, the same customer is worth $146. They keep coming back and each window gets more and more valuable. And the time between order tells you why as well. The average gap between orders is 54.6 days. But look at this. Over half of all reorders happen in the first 30 days after the first purchase. That's a customer who bought once, loved it, and is already coming back before the month is out. Now let's zoom out to what this actually means for the business. First order revenue this period was $2.16 million, which they're up 46.3% from over the prior period. But the attributed piece, the revenue we can directly tie back to retention efforts, went from $107K to $381K. That's a 253% lift. The 30-day attributed revenue alone jumped from $180K to nearly $500K. Stack it all together on a cohort chart and you're looking at a customer base worth $2.88 million at 365 days, with about $700K coming directly from retention work that wasn't happening before. So when I say a strong LTV changes the entire economics of a business, this is what I mean. It's the same store, same products, the customer didn't change. What changed is he stopped letting the first order just be the end of a relationship and start treating it as a beginning. So imagine not knowing this data beforehand, right? That you're spending, let's say $50 to acquire a $100 customer, but in 90 days, you get an extra $30 from that acquisition. So knowing that, how would you treat your business different? And when you compound all this over a full year, the difference between a brand running purely on acquisition and a brand that genuinely understands retention isn't just a small gap. So now the real question becomes, what actually is the best tool for building this type of retention? And when you look at every channel available to an e-commerce brand right now, one answer keeps coming up: the best channel for building retention. Think about every other marketing channel available to you right now. Paid ads, influencer, organic social. They all have one thing in common. They're built for attention. They're designed to put your brand in front of someone who hasn't heard of you yet, to interrupt their scroll, get them to click, and hopefully get them to take action. But none of those channels were built for what retention actually requires. Remember that retention is getting a customer to subconsciously see your brand as one worth coming back to over and over again. And that only happens if your brand always shows up at the right time and say the right things. That's where email and SMS comes in. Think about what it's like to get a message from someone who genuinely gets you, who knows exactly what you need, and who feels like a close friend reaching out on a random Tuesday because they had something worth saying. That's what email and SMS marketing feels like when it's done right. And the result, the list stops becoming just a list and it becomes the most reliable source of revenue for your entire business, with customers buying again and again without you having to convince them to buy every single time. And that distinction is incredibly important today, with skepticism being at an all-time high and personalization being the only thing that makes a customer feel seen. Now, the truth is most brands won't make this shift from acquisition only to retention until it's too late. They'll keep running the same ads, chasing new customers, and then wondering why their ad spend keeps going up but their profits never seem to follow. But you just spent the last few minutes understanding something that most brand owners won't figure out until it's already costing them. Yet there's a big difference between understanding why retention matters and actually being able to build that system that makes it happen for your specific brand. So if you want us to come in and do that for you, the link to book a free strategy call with my team is in the description below. We'll look at exactly where your retention is leaking and map out what a real retention program looks like for your brand. But if you're not quite there yet and you want to keep going deeper on the email side of things, I made a video breaking down the psychology behind premium email designs, how to make every email your brand sends feel like it's worth opening. Click this video right here to check it out.